Good morning. I'm attorney Mitchell Garabedian, Boston, Massachusetts. To my right is victim Robert Perone, Ricardo Donovan, an Archdiocesan Boston priest. To my left is Ann Barrett Doyle and Susie Norman, both of bishopaccountability.com. They do great work in tracking the histories of priests. We're here this morning because I released the names of 12 pedophile priests new to my list. 6 of those priests are religious brothers. Actually, 5 priests and 1 religious brother were serving in the Archdiocese of Boston at the time of the abuse. Now, that brings the number of priests who are serving within the Archdiocese of Boston on my list to 105, spanning decades. The pool of sexual abuse continues to overflow from the Archdiocese of Boston and around the world, damaging victims, their families, parishioners, friends, and the general public. I found it necessary to release this list so that victims can heal, other victims will become empowered, and children will be kept safe. The Archdiocese, for its own reasons, refuses to release a full list. And that's very painful to many victims and unsafe to children and the general public. The victims who were abused on my latest list were abused between 1951 and 1991. About 40 years. They range in age from 34 to 67 years old when they reported the abuse. And when they were abused, they were anywhere from 9 to 17 years old. One victim was sexually molested by Father James H. Lane, a former Boston police chaplain. The Archdiocese of Boston, through its investigators and attorneys, interviewed my client, his 3 brothers, and his 3 brothers. And there was overwhelming corroborative evidence that my client was sexually abused by Father Lane, even though Father Lane was a close family friend. My client had been molested at least 10 times from ages 10 to 11, and then one more time at Father Lane's home in Marshfield at age 15. Father Lane, as I said, was a close family friend. He actually married my client and baptized 2 of his children. And the question is, why did my client come forward? My client came forward because in 2010, he wanted to make peace. And he wanted to make peace so that he could have peace with his religion. He had suffered a heart attack and had triple bypass surgery. And he decided the only way to make peace was to come forward about Father Lane. He had reported the abuse as early as 36 years ago, again 30 years ago. Another brother found out it about 15 years ago. He had told another brother 5 years ago. It was not a secret. Many family members knew. It was very painful for him to come forward. To my right is Robert Perone. He was molested from ages 9 to 11, approximately 20 times, if not more, by Ricardo Donovan at St. Coleman's Church in Brockton, in the rectory. Father O'Donovan befriended my client because he was bagging groceries in a store near the church in which his mother worked at. And he befriended his mother and Robert will tell you his story about the tragedy that he has had to live with. Over 20 times he was sexually molested by Ricardo Donovan. In each and every one of these cases that I've posted, the victims have been found credible. and the settlements have been either 5 or 6 figures. The determination was not inconclusive. It was that my clients were found credible. There was corroborative evidence and direct evidence. And victims should be extremely proud of coming forward, telling the truth, taking the weight off their shoulders, and healing. For they're not only speaking for themselves, but they're speaking for other victims. As to the other cases, not involving the priest serving in Boston, those priests or brothers were associated with Ohio, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, whether they be dioceses or orders or just religious members of religious organizations. Clergy sexual abuse is international in scope and is ongoing and continuous. Right now, I represent 21 victims who were sexually molested in Haiti in United States District Court in Connecticut. I've filed 20 lawsuits. The perpetrator, Douglas Perlitz, was working at a Jesuit-run institution, which was also overseen by Fairfield University in Malta, the Knights of Malta. Most of those children were molested after 2002, when the National Catholic Conference of Bishops instituted their policies for the safety of children. Douglas Perlitz received a 19-year and 7-month jail sentence for sexually molesting children. I'll have Robert Perrone address you now. Thank you. Any questions first, or do you want?
So are there only 2 new names out of the 12? Is that right?
No, out of the 12, there are actually 7 new names that have never been listed before.
I actually have a list here.
I can give you the names if you want them. Yeah. The names are Brother Peter Claver, Father James H. Lane, Father James Nickel, Father Rickard O'Donovan, Father Leonard Walsh, Brother Vincent Jerome, Father Augustus Scott.
And out of those 7, 2 served in Boston.
Well, actually, there were 5 in Boston, serving in the Archdiocese of Boston. 2 were archdiocesan priests, Father Lane and Father O'Donovan. But when a religious person or a priest works in an archdiocese such as Boston, the Archdiocese of Boston is supposed to be supervising these priests. I have represented 105, I have represented hundreds of victims against 105 priests or religious brothers or members of religious organizations who were working within the Archdiocese of Boston. Any other questions?
Do you know where Brother Jerome worked?
Brother, yes, hold on one second.
New Jersey, right?
Yes, Brother Jerome.
And these are some assignment histories that we put together.
He was at Roselle Catholic High School in Roselle, New Jersey.
Do you know how many of these new names these guys are deceased?
Yes. 1 minute, please.
So if you look on the assignment histories that Susie just passed out, at the end, they note death dates for the ones we know are dead.
8 are deceased. Excuse me, 7 are deceased.
Of the 12.
Of the 12. 1 is in Wisconsin, Father Glenn Davidowich. Brother Vincent Jerome is in Florida. We do not know where Brother Robert Burgess is. We do not know where Father Henry Rancourt is. And Father Augustus Scott is in North Carolina. Who is watching them? Nobody knows. That's why the archdiocese and the diocese and the orders around the country have an obligation to list these priests so that the public is made aware and children are kept safe.
Talk a little bit more about Father Lane. Come out said he was, a whistleblower, and some people maybe have trouble believing it.
Father Paul Shanley was a whistleblower too. So, given the fact that he was a whistleblower, doesn't mean that he sexually molested children, just as in Father Paul Shanley's case. Again, the archdiocese interviewed my client, reviewed all the records I presented to them, interviewed the 3 brothers of my client, and one brother was even 15 years younger than my client. And they came to the conclusion that he was credible. He came forward because he wanted to make peace with his Lord, as he stated.
How old is your client now, Mitch?
56 years old.
Do you want to say, can you say what community he lives in?
He lives in southern New Hampshire.
In a Globe article today, it says that someone at the church where he worked described him as in tears when he was telling them about Father Gagan. What's your reaction to that, coming to a settlement with him for abusing another child?
All I can say is the evidence we presented was overwhelming. So I don't know what kind of tears they were. I just don't know. We presented individuals who gave stories that were consistent, who gave facts that were consistent. My client has been holding this in since a child. When he was 18, he told his best friend. 30 years ago, he told his oldest brother. His oldest brother told another brother. 5 years ago, my client told another brother. His sister knew. Father Lane even presided at my client's mother's funeral. It was just very difficult. There was an argument after the funeral between brothers not involving my client, the brothers of the family, because of Father Lane. Father Lane was very close to the family, and he gained access to my client through the parents.